What if a 1,000-year-old fox spirit fell in love with you? He uses enchanting tricks to make you willingly sever your own arm, replacing it with the sharp claws of a fox. He brands you with his family crest, and after you discard your own beauty, you marry him without question. Even if someone warns you that the fox spirit cannot be trusted, you find yourself unable to distinguish truth from illusion, good from evil, within this mesmerizing dream. Is this entity here to repay a debt of gratitude, or is he here to claim your very soul? This question introduces us to one of the most psychologically complex and intriguing stories of the year. Myth and reality echo each other. Hallucinations and truth intertwine. Focused on the protagonist Hinako Shimizu, the plot weaves a dreamy, yet terrifying snare. A quick heads up. This video contains all endings for SHF, so if you're worried about major spoilers, you might want to bookmark it for later. In 1960, the small town of Ebisugaoka, having lost its main economic pillar due to the depletion of mineral resources, was in steady decline. The people living here were consumed by social comparison, desperately seeking change and yearning for wealth. A common dynamic in these households was the strict father, gentle mother model. The Shimizu family was raising two daughters. The eldest, Junko, was graceful and refined, having been married off by her father to a powerful and affluent family. The younger daughter, Hinako, however, had always been rebellious and defiant. After yet another heated argument with her parents, she stormed out, intending to meet her friends at the temporary shrine of Chizuru in town. But just as they were chatting and laughing, a dense, unnatural fog abruptly rolled in. It was immediately clear that something was lurking within the mist.
Hinako? Ah, ごめん。何？裏切り者。
Hinako's dear friend, Sakuko Koshiji, became the fog's first victim. The oppressive mist birthed a sea of flowers, creeping relentlessly down the streets. Fortunately, Hinako had been on the track team since childhood. By sprinting and weaving through the residential area, she managed to outrun the immediate danger of the thick, ominous fog. All this stress and commotion triggered the intermittent headaches Hinako inherited from her mother. Luckily, her childhood friend, Shu Yanagita, whose family ran a pharmacy business, had prepared a special herbal remedy for her headaches, which also worked on external injuries. After taking 2 pills, Hinako's condition certainly stabilized. However, the small town was now utterly deserted. The only things moving besides Hinako were the grotesque, puppet-like creatures stitched together with human skin, blocking her path. These monsters, blind yet twisted, pursued her with eerie, fixed smiles. In a moment of desperation, Hinako grabbed a metal pipe to defend herself and tried to make her way back to the Chizuru temporary shrine. The horrific fate of her friend, Sakuko, fueled a burning rage in Hinako. She smashed every puppet and monstrous creature nearby with all her might. But after venting her fury, the pain in her head became unbearable. The throbbing agony was too much, and she collapsed into unconsciousness. When she finally opened her eyes again, Hinako found herself in the other world, inside a rustic, ancient ceremonial hall. She walked toward the altar, where offerings to the fox god were laid out. This looked like the Temizu ritual, a purification ceremony to cleanse defilement. But whose defilement was being cleansed this time? Before she could even process the thought, the excruciating headache struck once more. Hinako desperately tried to run outside, but the hall's large doors were sealed shut. Just then, someone abruptly swung the doors open.
おはよう。悪い夢にうなされていたかな。
悪い夢。
怪我はないか。怪我をするようなことは私がする。君は体を大事にしなさい。
The man in the fox mask spoke to her in a gentle, almost tender voice, seeming to know everything about Hinako. Following his lead, Hinako ventured deeper into the darkness. Using a peculiar key made of solidified mist, she successfully unlocked the door to the hidden path beyond.
先ほどの扉は客人を招くためのものだ。だがこちらの扉は聖域へ入ることを許された者にしか開かれない。
私は入っていいの？
もちろんだとも。君を招くために今日がある。
But just then, something in the darkness slammed into Hinako, sending her flying. Simultaneously, at Shu's desperate calls, Hinako opened her eyes again, returning to the surface world. Both of them were still completely bewildered. They decided their next move should be to find their other friend, Rinko, who lived on the east side of town. They needed to follow the path along the rice fields, but out in the fields, a truly bizarre phenomenon occurred. The fog was accompanied by a loop, a kind of ghost wall effect, where they kept walking in circles. Even the scarecrows seemed to be dissolving into the mist. If they answered their cryptic riddles incorrectly, the scarecrows would instantly come to life and swing their sickles at Hinako. If she answered correctly, the figures would twist and contort, pointing her in the right direction. After much struggle, they finally reached the house. As expected, Rinko was home, but even her grandmother, who suffered from poor mobility, had vanished. The three friends agreed that they had to leave the town immediately. However, the bridge crossing the river had been destroyed by the parasitic Lycoris. Their only remaining option was to take the prefectural road located on the west side of town, behind Shu's house. Just as they were preparing to leave, Hinako noticed an unexpected message. Falling down the stairs, Hinako re-entered the other world. Now the dark corridor was filled with an intense sense of dread. Inside the rooms were various pieces of evidence warning that the fox spirit was untrustworthy. Hinako also acquired a razor, which had been passed down through generations by the Taoist priestess and the shaman woman. Deeper inside, she heard sounds that simply shouldn't have been audible in that place. Hinako followed the sound relentlessly. She eventually reached a covered walkway and witnessed a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Sakuko Koshiji, the daughter of the priest at Chizen Shrine in Ebisugaoka, had a tendency toward mild autism. Because of this, she was constantly discriminated against both at school and in her everyday life, with only Hinako and Rinko as her true friends. Therefore, the scene before Hinako filled her with utter despair. She could only beg repeatedly for the figure to stop what it was doing. The fox masked man descended without a word. Fortunately, just as Sakuko was about to strike Hinako, the fox masked man intervened, saving her.
怪我はないか。大丈夫だ。これしき大事。救急に律令のことここだが。
He explained that the Sakuko she had just encountered was actually the defilement that had been clinging to Hinako. For the upcoming ritual, both Hinako and he needed to perform a deeper level of cleansing. But as Hinako prepared herself, the divine water in front of her suddenly turned into boiling magma. The fox masked man quickly offered words of comfort, and when Hinako looked again, the magma had reverted back to pure divine water. However, a new unsettling event was about to unfold. Hinako was abruptly awakened again by Shu in the surface world.
だね。あんた階段から落ちたんだよ。
Rinko's strangely evasive attitude was unsettling. The three returned to the main town, only to find the streets completely overrun by monsters. They decided their only route was to detour to the school first, and then take the path up the mountain from the back gate. But Hinako turned her head for a moment, and her two friends had vanished. Hinako was forced to face all the dangers alone, and she began to hear strange, unsettling whispers.
ひなこをほっといて。もう手遅れなの。どうしようもない。このまま何の役にも立つ。
今は俺もわからない。
Even stranger was Rinko's demeanor right outside the school gate. She spoke words that were even more shocking and alarming.
俺は
なら言ってあげる。ひなこはね、死んだんだよ。ひなこは向こうの世界で楽しくやっているんだから。
相棒遅かったね。さあ行こうぜ。
I know this is confusing right now, but hold on. Old Yuan will provide a detailed explanation later. I promise it will all make sense. The group eventually reached the school, but the gate leading up the mountain path was locked. Rinko, refusing to leave Shu's side, insisted Hinako go find the key herself. Though the school wasn't large, it was heavily overgrown and corrupted by the parasitic flower sea. After some searching, Hinako found the key to the staff cabinet inside the girls' locker room. She successfully retrieved the mountain gate key from the cabinet. Following Shu's suggestion, Hinako decided to take a short rest before the three of them began the climb. Feeling utterly exhausted, Hinako drifted off to sleep, feeling strangely guilty as she did. When she awoke once more, Hinako heard the fox masked man's heartfelt confession.
魂を奪われた私だ。無理しなくていい。まだ休んでいるといい。清めの水が少し強すぎたのかもしれない。君は思った以上に繊細で敏感なようだ。でもよく頑張ったね、Hinako.
Hinako seemed completely mesmerized. In a daze, she walked toward the large entrance, blindly pressing forward in the other world. Because under the fox masked man's direction, Hinako was about to complete a terrifying task, personally killing her own friends. First, she permanently locked Sakuko, who feared the darkness, inside a pitch-black prison cell. Next, she threw the vain, image-obsessed Rinko into a pit of flames to be consumed by the heat. Finally, she hung her childhood best friend Shu from a high beam. No matter what her three friends said, Hinako seemed to have lost her soul possessed, yet she completed the horrifying task decisively. Behind the gate, the fox masked man had been waiting for her. But just as the two were about to proceed deeper, Hinako's headache suddenly flared up, and she unexpectedly snapped back to the school in the surface world. However, Shu and Rinko were nowhere to be found. While Hinako stood frozen in shock, the entity lurking in the mist aggressively closed in on her again. A fallen cedar tree miraculously blocked the creature's chase, giving Hinako a brief window of escape. She quickly ran toward Shu's family home up in the mountains. This area was known as the local medicine mountain, rumored to even contain the legendary medicinal herb, the god's flower. But soon enough, the mist, having circumvented the tree, began to creep up again. Blood-red flowers constantly bloomed on both sides of the path, and monsters emerged from them to block Hinako's way. The situation became increasingly desperate. Fortunately, Hinako, through sheer chance, stumbled into the long-abandoned site of an old shrine. This was the location of Ebisugaoka's ancient faith, the old torii of the Chizen Shrine, which Sakuko's ancestors had served. The huge cedar tree there was magnificent and grand, but sadly, it had been struck by a massive lightning bolt, leaving a jarring visible fissure in the trunk. Arriving at Shu's house, it was still completely empty. As Hinako stood stunned, a sudden noise echoed from the depths of the mist. The thing in the mist struck Hinako with brutal force. The scene shifts and the fox masked man is seen leading Hinako toward the deepest part of the mansion.
ここから先は大きな苦痛を伴うことになる。
いえ、私は恐れません。
では行こう。ここでは3つの儀式がある。
In the corner, someone was still desperately trying to warn her, but Hinako was too far gone to notice. Following the fox masked man's instructions, Hinako was about to undergo 3 rituals. The first was the voluntary replacement of her arm. Next, she was branded on her back with the fox masked man's family crest. Finally, the most extreme step was the complete abandonment of her own face. She would permanently don the fox mask, and from then on see the world through the eyes of a fox. The intense pain caused Hinako to briefly resist, but the fox masked man subdued her with a single glance, regaining complete control. Having completed the ceremonies of this current life, Hinako and the fox masked man walked toward the final ceremonial hall amidst the blessings of the attendees. Among those offering congratulations was Hinako's own older sister, Junko. The couple began the wedding ritual for this life, but someone immediately interfered.
Rinko? リンコ、私はあんたの願い通り死んでいなくなるから。だから私のことなんか忘れて幸せに生きなよ。忘れてやる、手伝ってやる。私の記憶から世界からお前の名前なんて全部消えたんです。
Rinko Nishida, the normally gentle class president, who cared for Sakuko and Hinako like an older sister, always strived to present herself perfectly. Yet her deepest desire was Shu, the boy who was always inseparable from Hinako. With rough claws, Hinako violently tore at Rinko's flesh. It wasn't long before Hinako struck Rinko down.
痛くなかった。リンコのこんな姿。でも今は嬉しい。お別れに対して私たちはようやく本音を語り合えたね。お幸せに。
Just then, Hanako's headache returned, and she began frantically questioning her own identity.
私はじゃない。
どうしたひなこ。
私は
君はひなこじゃないか。
私は
君はひなこだ。
私はひなこ。
Simultaneously, Hinako woke up in the surface world at Shu's house, and the telephone began to ring.
ひなこかい？え？お母さん？そろそろ帰っておいで。お夕飯ができたから。おい、リンコを待たせ。
Fearing that Shu and Rinko were in danger, Hinako rushed back to her own home, but the Shimizu residence had completely transformed.
どういうこと？廊下、襖、間取りが全部変わってる。
The Shimizu house had become a location where time and space were distorted. Hinako needed to find 3 different calendars to access 3 distinct timelines to solve puzzles. The ultimate goal was to rescue Shu. But when the door finally opened, it was already too late. When the door on the other side finally opened, Hinako was faced with her parents, a father easily angered and addicted to alcohol, and a mother passively letting herself be controlled, both seated at a wedding banquet.
遅かったな。どうぞご覧ください。よー。
They slowly mutated into grotesque figures. They simultaneously attacked Hinako while relentlessly blaming and scolding her with harsh words. Hinako was too terrified to speak, forced to endure the verbal abuse as she struck them again and again until she finally managed to fight off her mutated father. As the 2 figures stumbled their way out, her mother turned back with a profound, knowing look. Then they ripped off their rotting flesh and stepped outside. Hinako quickly chased after them. But she witnessed a truly horrifying sight. The monster in the mist crushed both her father and mother. A severe headache simultaneously flared up, but the perspective suddenly returned to the more vibrant Hinako in the other world. She and the fox mask man shared 3 cups of rice wine. Shortly after, they exchanged rings. Meanwhile, the Hinako in the surface world was completely overwhelmed by immense grief and rage. Consumed by unstoppable fury, she grabbed a weapon and chased after the monster in the mist. But the entity was waiting for her outside the Chizuru temporary shrine. With the support of her older sister, Junko, the creature crushed the Hinako of the surface world. As for the reason, we'll hold that thought for a moment. Concurrently, the fox Hinako in the other world was completing the final wedding ceremony. As everything was set, the red flowers shockingly bloomed across her body. It turns out that the mist monster that killed her parents was, in fact, the fox Hinako from the other world. She now possessed a new name, White Defilement. Meanwhile, the Hinako who had died in the surface world surprisingly arrived in the other world. Suffering from unbearable headaches and unclear consciousness, she frantically stuffed the red capsule Shu gave her into her mouth. At this point, the giant figure started to lose control. She destroyed the ceremonial hall, and after a huge battle with White Defilement, everything within the game's reality began to collapse. She desperately ran outside, constantly shifting between the surface and other worlds. The pain in her head intensified, and the number of red capsules she took grew higher and higher. Just then, a siren blared, and Hinako left behind her final desperate scream. Shortly after, a police radio transmission brought the story to a close.
米川により県警本部県道8号線にて当該事案の被疑者と思わしき女性に襲われた男性2名のうち1名は現在心肺停止の状態。羽倉町1より県警本部一部被害者に使用された包丁ですが敷地内からは発見できず被疑者は現在もこれを所持している可能性が高いと思われます。どうぞ。
県警本部から各局女性被疑者は20代花嫁装束身長は 160cm 少々常吉神宮より逃走中凶器を所持している可能性が極めて高い各局はくれぐれも慎重に対応されたし
羽倉町1から県警本部被疑者は赤と白のカプセル状の薬のようなものを犯行時に断続的に服用していたとのことです。
県警本部より神楽町1それは式場内で発見された正体不明のカプセル薬と同一のものかどうぞ。
羽倉町1から県警本部被疑者が服用する際に口からこぼしたカプセル薬
And that is the only ending you can achieve on your first playthrough of Silent Hill F. I bet many of you are confused about several things, which is understandable. This is because the game's story timelines and even the characters' clothing are deliberately misleading. But don't worry, I've managed to achieve all the endings across multiple playthroughs. The 3 main storylines have been fully mapped out. Hit that like button, and let's start the full breakdown. First, the easiest trap to fall into is believing that the Hinako of the surface world and the Hinako of the other world are the same person. While they share one body, they possess entirely different behaviors and consciousnesses. Secondly, the close-up of the red capsules in the first ending confirms that the headache medicine Shu provided was flawed. Excessive use actually intensified Hinako's symptoms. The proof lies in this document. The red pills contain the replacement drug used by the cult in the Silent Hill series to control their followers. This directly led to Hinako committing murder, while wearing a wedding dress in the real world. Therefore, if you want to unlock other endings, you absolutely must stop taking this basic recovery medicine. It's important to understand that the town of Ebisugaoka has a history of changing mythical beliefs. Legend has it that when Susanoo, the storm god, slew the 8-headed serpent, Yamada no Orochi, one of its heads fell right here in Ebisugaoka. It transformed into the poison dragon, constantly spewing forth the bane of the land. The poison dragon here represents Ebisugaoka's declining mining value, making the town increasingly uninhabitable. However, the Chizen sacred cedar, which the people worshipped at the time, suppressed the dragon by absorbing the toxic water through its roots. Consequently, people revered this enormous tree and built the magnificent Chizen shrine, which the Higurashi family maintained for generations. But this stability didn't last. The tree's water-absorbing power slowly diminished, and one day, the great cedar was shockingly split by a tremendous bolt of lightning. Not long after that incident, Ebisugaoka saw the rise of the fox spirit worship. The Chizen shrine subsequently fell into disrepair, and people began setting up shrines to the fox spirit everywhere in the streets. The fox spirit replaced the mountain tree god, continuing to suppress the poison dragon using a new method. While the fox spirit was eager to help the residents, it could not tolerate the slightest disrespect. Those who failed to honor the fox spirit would either fall ill or, in severe cases, be consumed by internal parasites and die violently in the local streams. Fast forward to the Meiji era. A towering, over 7-foot-tall armored giant appeared in the town. Wielding a katana, he shouted against the worship of the fox spirit, while slaughtering its followers. The ceremonial Suzukiri blade he carried was the key to breaking the cycle. Jumping back to Hinako's childhood, one day, a group of boys in the town chased a small fox that had wandered into a restricted area at the amusement park. This resulted in one of the boys, named Jusei, getting his eye scratched by the fox. Just as the adults were about to kill the small fox, Hinako set it free. However, bizarre things began happening to Jusei. Despite doctors finding no physical ailments, that night, Jusei suffered from a persistent high fever. Yet, he miraculously recovered the next day. Even his behavior became noticeably more composed and refined. His learning abilities became exceptionally outstanding. This transformation led Jusei, who was the illegitimate son of a wealthy man, to gain his biological father's appreciation shortly after. He successfully returned to the main family household. However, even after moving away from Ebisugaoka, Jusei, for reasons unknown, maintained his deep affection for Hinako. The two exchanged letters from childhood well into adulthood. The figure represented by the fox mask man is, in fact, Jusei. So, with the necessary background established, let's connect the dots. Returning to the beginning, starting from the second playthrough, the subject of Hinako's argument with her parents changes from filial piety to marriage and betrothal. Although the game characters wear high school uniforms, this is meant to disrupt the timeline and subtly hint at Hinako's desire to stay at that age forever. When Hinako turned 20, Jusei returned to Ebisugaoka with a generous betrothal gift, proposing marriage. Hinako's parents were extremely pleased. But the deeper reason for her hesitation was that she simply couldn't figure out whether she should agree to this marriage. The most direct reason was that, deep down, Hinako could not understand or accept that an arranged marriage could lead to happiness. The social context determined the family structure. In the Shimizu family, and indeed across Japan at that time, society promoted the ideal that men should work outside, while women should remain at home and be diligent. The distinction between the sexes was rigidly enforced by society. Hinako, who enjoyed playing rough with boys as a child, was isolated by this restrictive environment. Fortunately, Shu accepted her. The two called each other partners and shared wonderful childhood memories. This memory became the safe haven, the emotional anchor, that Hinako deeply relied on. But as she reached the age of 20, her debt-ridden, short-tempered, alcoholic father and her mother, who dared not resist, inevitably began arranging Hinako's marriage. To make matters worse, her closest sister, Junko, had also agreed to her parents' arrangements, marrying into a wealthy family and continuing to play the role of the submissive wife. All of this caused Hinako great internal conflict and depression. Should she accept the arrangement and embrace the so-called happiness, or follow her own choice, even if it meant she might regret it later? This internal struggle, exacerbated by Shu's special medicine, split Hinako's mind into two, giving birth to two completely opposite personalities. Therefore, based on the choice of who Hinako walks away with in the end, the game offers two main conclusions. The difference lies in whether you successfully obtain the Suzukiri blade, the spiritual sword that once wounded the giant, by making offerings to 5 ancient Jizo statues, and whether you cleanse the resentment of the mountain tree that is attached to it. The game cleverly uses the conflict between the mountain tree worship and the fox spirit worship, the battle between the blade and the fox, to symbolize whether Hinako accepts Shu or Jusei. One mystery has puzzled Old Yuan for a long time. Why does the doll that her sister gave Hinako appear so frequently in the game? The reason it feels uncanny is that the doll doesn't represent the sister. Instead, it symbolizes Shu, who remains constant, and more importantly, It represents the ancient cedar tree faith. The evidence is that the doll appears every time Hinako manages to escape from the other world, and the Hinako of the surface world is officially awakened by Shu's desperate calls. The doll also possesses the properties of wood, reinforcing its connection to the mountain tree. Therefore, if you acquire the sickle blade and choose to cleanse the mountain tree's resentment attached to it, favoring the fox spirit side, Shu will finally admit that the medicine he gave Hinako was problematic. He will transform into the 2-meter-tall armored giant from the Meiji era to fight Hinako in the final boss battle. In reality, this represents Shu crashing the wedding banquet, permanently severing any possibility of the two remaining friends. Afterward, Hinako, dressed in the Shiromaku, will bid farewell to her dependence on the past and marry into the wealthy family. But don't forget the price of this marriage. The severed arm, the branding, and the stripped face respectively symbolize self-abandonment, submission to discipline, and forever wearing a mask to present the image of a traditional Japanese housewife. This temporary solution means Hanako's inner fears will relentlessly resurface. If you do not cleanse the sickle blade and instead align with the mountain tree's resentment, represented by Shu, then Shu successfully disrupts the ritual. The final boss becomes the Fox Mask Man. Jusei represents infinity, contrasted with the limitation of reality. He leverages his family's wealth and the social pressure Hinako faces to impose what he believes is the best form of love upon her. A seemingly gentle but ultimately forceful control. This intensifies Hanako's fear of the future, causing her to gravitate toward Shu, who understands her better despite their lack of romantic feelings. However, this act of escaping reality is ultimately futile. Choosing to hide in a fictional comfort is like putting out a fire with dry fuel. The nightmare will eventually return. There is one crucial element that remains consistent across all endings. No matter what choice you make, the preceding endgame bosses remain unchanged. This is because Sakuko, Rinko, and her parents each carry their own specific symbolism. Sakuko, as a similarly isolated child, treasured her relationship with Hinako the most. But if Hinako were to marry far away, Sakuko's remaining days would plunge back into darkness. That is why she repeatedly calls Hinako a traitor. Simultaneously, this mirrors the true self of the protagonist, which feels betrayed by the choice of an arranged marriage. Meanwhile, Rinko has always been infatuated with Shu in the real world. Therefore, when Hinako was proposed to, Rinko constantly advised Shu to give up. She transformed her feelings for Shu into resentment toward Hinako, equating Hanako's departure for marriage with a kind of death. This character is steeped in jealousy and social comparison, and she is constantly criticizing Hinako behind her back. This subtly represents the immense social pressure and worldly judgment Hinako must face regarding the real-world issues of marriage and societal expectations. Shu's identity as a childhood friend symbolizes the beauty of past innocence. Furthermore, the addictive nature of the red pills he provides symbolizes the temporary relief gained from escaping and constantly looking back at the past. However, this is merely treating the symptom, not the root cause. The underlying problems are not solved. In fact, the situation worsens until it completely breaks down. The two friends each represent different struggles, 3 distinct projections of Hinako's inner world. Their narratives illustrate the complex internal struggle the protagonist undertakes, guided by external forces, concerning self-identity, the cost of growing up, and life choices. Until she walks down the aisle, whether passively or actively, she must finally bid farewell to the past. The subsequent encounter with the parent bosses represents the source of Hinako's fear of marriage. Her father's alcoholism and violence toward her mother and children, coupled with the decision to arrange her marriage under economic stress, fostered an intense fear of patriarchy in Hinako. At the same time, her mother's passive acceptance led Hinako to equate traditional marriage with the total loss of self. However, this is not absolute. In the true ending, which is achieved by meeting specific conditions, the parents each have a unique story sequence. In her mother's monologue, she reveals that the father only became passive and short-tempered because he had lost all their savings in a scam. She also successfully fought back at one point. When the father apologizes, he states that marrying Jusei, given his comfortable family background, is a good place to settle down, and that Shu is also a trustworthy person. It can be said that, subconsciously, her mother perceived the arranged marriage as giving her daughter a better option in life. But ultimately, she also realized that making this choice for her daughter would only be a one-sided oppression. Therefore, in the true ending, the parents' figures are not just the physical embodiment of Hinako's troubles, but a complete projection of the social context of that era. This realization forces Hinako to engage in a deeper reflection, one that differs significantly from the thoughts she has in the other endings. Therefore, Silent Hill F cleverly integrates its answers into the gameplay. It suggests that you must deeply reflect and then courageously trust your own choice. This time, Hinako successfully cleansed the vengeful spirit from the spiritual blade and offered the fox brooch, which symbolizes her worship, to the ancient Jizo statues. These changes ultimately manifested in the ceremonial hall. During the struggle between the two Hinakos, one looking back, the other looking forward, Jusei, the modern man, finally recognized the ruthless control hidden behind both faiths. At this point, both Hinakos must face the two deities simultaneously. The fox spirit ancestor mocked Jusei for being weak, foolish, and unable to sweet-talk women effectively. He represents the subconscious biases of some men regarding traditional women, the external societal pressure that both Hinako and Jusei must confront. Meanwhile, the stubborn, antiquated Shinto god, using the doll her sister gave her, constantly reminded Hinako of the domestic tragedies of her sister and mother. This kept Hinako trapped between her deep fear of marriage and the desire to bravely grasp happiness. Her indecision lingered. Simultaneously defeating the two deities signifies that Hinako Shimizu, after deep reflection, finally realizes that the key to breaking free is never about who she chooses or where she runs away to. Instead, it is about making her own decision and courageously breaking free from external constraints, while continuously overcoming her internal demons. Only through this process can she achieve true personal independence and complete her own salvation. In the end, the human Hinako destroyed the doll, which represented anxiety and dependence. The fox bride Hinako removed the mask, which symbolized the traditional dutiful wife. Jusei also let go of his own stubborn preconceptions, beginning to truly understand what respectful love means. In an atmosphere of peace and reconciliation, Hinako finally accepted her inner complexity and contradictions. She chose to bravely embark on a new life with an open heart, even if her inner world, the surface world, contained no one else. We sincerely wish that you, the viewer, can bravely move forward through your fears and find freedom amidst your restraints. So why not hit that follow button?